political independence in a supranational organization such as the European Central Bank is of a totally different nature. Because, first of all, you have another public. So if Bundesbank had behaved like ECB, there would have been a public outcry, an outburst of anger. Just to remind you of the fact that in the 19th, the Minister of the Treasury, Mr. Weigel, a very simple-minded man, once said, well, we should better sell the gold reserves of the Bundesbank to fill the gap, the budgetary gap. There was an outburst of anger.
I remember
and
the outrage.
The Bundesbank was considered by the German population as a trust, as a fiduciary of their assets. So if a Minister of Finance acts badly, Bundesbank punished him. So there was a countervailing power. That countervailing power, this system of checks and balances between a national Minister of Finance and a national central bank is no longer there. And within the European Central Bank, Germany has as much voting power as Estland, as Cyprus, as Malta, which is ridiculous. Ridiculous. That's why, in any way, the European Central Bank is the great problem in the years ahead of us. It has to be reformed, and it will be reformed, otherwise Germany will leave the European Monetary Union. Look at these press conferences with the number 2 of ECB, Victor Constancio, who considers himself as unfailable in his judgments. This is not the system of checks and balances we have accepted in 1992. And the Germans are very attached to sound, sane monetary policy, which in the long run keeps the currency stable.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite clear from the record of the Deutschmark, you know, from 1950 to 2000. If you compare the record of the Deutschmark to any other European currency, you know, the Deutschmark stood head and shoulders above all of the others in terms of preserving purchasing power. So the promise that had been made to the German people that the euro would be managed like the Deutschmark and that the ECB would be run like the Bundesbank, that was clearly broken.
That is clearly broken, and it becomes now extremely obvious after the resignation of my friend Dr. Stark, who resigned a little late, but not too late to give a wake-up call to the Germans. Letting them know that what happens in ECB is exactly the contrary of what he has fought for. Stark was the man in charge of creating the monetary union. He sold the idea, which was an experiment, to create a monetary union of sovereign states. You've never had that before, of states who wanted to remain sovereign. And he spent a lot of work on the persuasion of those in Germany who were reluctant to do so. Ottmar Issing, the first chief economist of the European Central Bank, is, I suppose at least, appalled by what is now happening. So the new president of the Bundesbank, Mr. Weidmann, a young and promising man, is now trying to find allies within European Central Bank, within the board, in order to get more support for the German stability culture of a monetary policy which has a main object, price stability, full stop, and not the saving or redemption of this or that country.
I guess similar to Mr. Stark's resignation was also Mr. Weber's resignation. That was a wake-up call too, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a wake-up call as well, but Weber has never really tried. He was a man apparently not willing to fight and to combat. Well, and he did this in order to show that he's no longer supported by the German government, that he's not willing to take over ECB, a claim which a German claim nobody could contest. So he did a lot of harm to the Germans, as a matter of fact. A man in his 50s must be able to face combat and has to stand up once there's an adverse decision. This was the behavior of a typical German academic who didn't want to go on the battlefield. You know, I'm a naval soldier. I would have taken things in a different way. I would have stood up again and to fight even more and more fiercely. That is a challenge. But Stark is a fighter. He has always been extremely vigorous and combative, but he could no longer accept that after Portugal, Greece and Ireland, under Trichet's presidency, which is a very autocratic presidency, the bank started even to take outright positions of Spanish and Italian bonds. So he stepped down, and everybody understood this is no longer the Bundesbank.